Thank you so much for attending this Lunch and Learn hosted by the Tort Trial and Insurance Practice Sessions Animal Law Committee and co-sponsored by the Law Practice Management Task Force, the Committee on Outreach to Law Students, the General Practice and Solo Division, and finally the Committee on Outreach to Young Lawyers. If you're interested in getting involved with the committee, please reach out. Just a reminder that this Lunch and Learn is not for CLE credit. Instead, it's meant to provide insight on how to build a fulfilling law practice. We would like to be an interactive session, so please ask questions in the Q&A function and we'll do our best to answer them on air. Finally, this Lunch and Learn is being recorded, so please bear in mind when posting those questions. So I just want to start out by quickly introducing our amazing panelists that have taken time out of their day to be here. First off, we have Jeremy Cohen. Jeremy founded Boston Dog Lawyers in 2016, but even before then, Jeremy has been making a difference for the rights of animals by handling animal-related cases, many of which involve pets being unfairly labeled as dangerous by those unfamiliar with animal behavior. Now he continues to stay true to his mission to advocate for the rights of pet owners and ensure that authorities reach their decisions in the right way. Julie Firstman is a highly experienced and accomplished litigator who has represented clients in a broad range of areas such as business, contracts, insurance coverage, agribusiness, product liability, personal injury defense, and equine law. Julie is also widely considered one of the nation's leading practitioners in equine law, where among many other things, she has helped draft and advocate for equine activity liability legislation with the goal of protecting and expanding the industry. Bonnie Lutz has been practicing law for over 2 decades, where her practice consists of defending veterinarians in litigation and administrative actions, in addition to providing general counsel services for humane societies throughout California. Due to her unique practice areas, she has extensive knowledge of the California Veterinary Medicine Practice Act and the laws which regulate humane societies. Eleanor Molbagat not only maintains her law practice focused on animal rights and protection, but is also the legal counsel for the Humane Society of New York and represents North Shore Animal League America, as well as other humane organizations. Among her many accomplishments, Eleanor was the first general counsel for the ASPCA, where she established the Society's legislative program and was the chair and founder of the first American Bar Association's Animal Protection Committee and edited ABA's Animal Law Report. And finally, we have Bruce Wagman. Bruce has been using his legal degree to protect and save animals and assist those who care for them. His practice covers a broad range of animal-related legal issues and has not only published 2 major works in the field of animal law, but he has also founded Project Chimps, a chimpanzee sanctuary that is home to chimpanzees retired from research laboratories. Unfortunately, today, Katie Barnett could not be with us, but without further ado, let's begin our program. My first question for the panel is, what was your first spark that made you either interested in animal law or made you want to practice animal law? Jeremy, we will start with you first.
Okay. Thank you, Kenzie. I was practicing an area of law that was not very fulfilling and quite boring, doing debt collection. And I got a call that my stepkid's dog, a German Shepherd named Jesse, had bit somebody. And there was going to be a hearing. When a dog bites somebody, there's generally a hearing in small cities and towns around the country. And I said I would go and see what was going to happen. Not having any experience, just knowing Jesse a little bit and knowing Jesse was a pretty good dog. When I got there was a room filled with people, all of them against Jesse, and now all of them against me, all wanting Jesse to be put down. He bit a woman in the calf when she was walking by. Jesse had a history of being able to get free every time he would go from the car to the house and the house to the car. And this time the woman tried to protect her small dog, and her calf, I said, got in the way of a dog bite because I had nothing else to say that day. But they voted that night to euthanize Jesse. They referred to Jesse as an Al-Qaeda terrorist, laying in wait for people. And I just found that amazing because these attributes that they were putting on Jesse. And I had one question: did anybody evaluate Jesse's behavior? What do we know about him and why this might have happened? Animal control no one had met Jesse or spent time with him, and I just couldn't believe they'd get to this decision. And that's when I had to come home and tell everybody. And suddenly, I was important in this non-traditional family, and I filed an appeal to save Jesse's life, and it made the local papers, and that was super, super exciting. It was real scary too, not knowing anything what I was doing, but I found my way. Steve Wise took a phone call from me and helped give me the roadmap. And from there, we saved Jesse's life, and my career was born. Ultimately, Jesse lived for 5 more years, and at the end, Jesse was living with me.
Oh,
And one of the conditions of Jesse's life was that he couldn't go back to the town from where he came. So on Jesse's last day, he was dying of cancer. We took him to that town and bought him an ice cream, we had a steak with him, and drove him through the town just to show that he wasn't that bad a dog after all. And clearly, they made the right decision by overturning his death sentence.
Thank you, Jeremy. Julie, we'll move on to you.
hi there. What got me interested? Well, kind of like Jeremy, I was an associate years ago. We're taking you 30 plus years ago, and really wasn't all that interested in the work I was doing, and frankly, not liking what I was doing as an associate. And it's just part of being one. You are handed work. The expectation is that you will carry out the work in a very competent, if not tremendously good fashion. And of course, you want to meet that standard, but the work itself wasn't all that interesting. But one thing was to me, aside from work, and that was horses. I owned my first horse at age 10. My husband and I have a property in the suburbs right near the city of Detroit where we've had horses on our property. Very atypical for the area. Horses have been a big part of my life. So I thought if I could blend the two, that would be great. Taking you still 30 years ago, there's no internet, very few, if any, resources involving horses and the law. So what I ended up doing once I had the interest is I kind of created a body of law. Not that I developed it, but I learned what it was pre-internet by going to law libraries every single weekend for hours, reading, copying, gathering, creating binders, and discovering trends in the law. And that's what got me involved with the equine liability statutes. They were just beginning to take hold starting in the late 80s. And there were areas too of interest, contract disputes. So now I'm reading ALR annotations, cases, and things. And that really grew my interest. And that led to articles, hundreds of them, and 4 books. So the interest became really a passion and a big part of my life.
Thank you. Bonnie, you can go next.
Hi. Well, I was 53 years old and starting a second career. I had been a microbiologist, and then I was starting a career as an attorney. So I was fortunate to be hired by a law firm that was opening an office in Orange County, California, which is where I live. So I went to work for them, and sort of like Jeremy, I was given this body of law that I was working on. In my case, it was mold litigation defense, because as a previous microbiologist, I could pronounce the names of the molds. So they thought that would be really awesome for me to do. It was okay. It was boring. It was not what I went to law school for at age 50. But I had a really good friend who said, why don't you go to work for veterinarians? Something I'd never considered. He was a veterinarian. And it turned out that my law firm had a long-standing relationship with Fireman's Fund Insurance, who at the time was the major insurer for professional liability for veterinarians in California. So I contacted them, just sort of cold called the adjuster and said, hey, I'd like to do some of these cases, these veterinary malpractice cases. And he said, okay, we'll give it a try. So the rest is history. I mean, I've been doing it since 2000, and it's been very fulfilling. And that's all I do is defend veterinarians.
Awesome. Eleanor?
Well, my path is a little different. When I was 14 at home, I remember receiving my parents did a pamphlet brochure from the National Anti-Vivisection Society, and it showed a a monkey with electrodes. And I was so horrified and just felt at some point in my life, I needed to do something about that. And I became a vegetarian after that. And I went to law school really not knowing what I was going to do, because at that time, there were really no animal law courses. There was nothing really called animal law that I knew of. But during law school, I saw posted an announcement that the Society for Animal Rights had an internship program, and I applied and I got that for my first or second year of law school. And I worked with Professor Holzer, and shout out to him because he was really the first animal rights lawyer, I think, ever in this country. And we did work on trying to close the city zoos. I mean, it wasn't successful, and many, many years later, we're still in the same boat to some degree. But that inspired me. I volunteered at the ASPCA the same summer, and they had a law enforcement department. And I saw just problems that it could be better. So I went to the ASPCA that summer and said, I think you could use a lawyer. And they said, well, okay, when you're done with law school, come back. And I did. And I worked there for 15 years before I started my own practice. So that's how I got involved. And after that, I started my own practice where I represent other humane organizations.
Thank you, Eleanor. And Bruce?
Yes, hi. I was clerking for the Northern District of California this summer after law school, and honestly just looking for a way to get out of chambers on an August afternoon, and the American Bar Association was having its conference at the Marriott in San Francisco. And I noticed a 1 hour breakout session that had a couple of my heroes on the panel. One was a pretty famous lawyer named William Kunstler, who represented the Chicago Seven and the American Indian movement, and near the end of his life moved towards animal protection. And another was, oddly enough, a famous rock and roll singer named Grace Slick, who had been in a band called the Jefferson Airplane. Also on there was somebody I'd never heard of up until that point. Her name was Joyce Tischler. And so I said to my wife, why don't we go check this out? It sounds interesting. It's about animals. We love animals. And it was an hour-long session. There was also somebody from PETA there, and it was an hour-long session. And I don't really remember much of what I saw. What I do remember, as clearly as if it happened 10 minutes ago, is we walked out of that room together, and I looked over at Deborah, and like me, she was crying. And I know we saw a lot about what happened with farm animals in America. And that day I decided I would do what I could to help animals through the law. I didn't think it was going to turn into anything like this. I figured it would be some pro bono work. I already had a job at a firm doing commercial litigation coming up. And but I went and started doing pro bono work here and there. What I did, as somebody else mentioned, because I'm old too, there was no internet. I had a book, I remember, that had a page after page of organizations that had animal in the name. And I just typed out a letter, literally typed out a letter on a typewriter, and sent out about 100 letters and said, hi, I'd like to help. And most of them were smart enough to say, you don't know anything, come back in 5 years. But a couple of them said, okay. And that began what's turned into a complete career. I've been practicing animal law exclusively for 22 years now in a variety of areas.
Thank you, everyone. So our next question is a general question for all of the panelists, and for ease of transition, we'll just go in that same order that we just did. So the question is, when it comes to your overall career, what do you consider your most meaningful accomplishment? This could be a certain case that you had, a goal achieved, etc. Jeremy, we'll start with you.
Prior to this area of law, I was not a lawyer who had any confidence. I did not like going to court, and I certainly didn't think that I could at all even understand the law, and I was just handling contract cases. But a few years ago, as my confidence built, we suddenly had a case regarding a pet custody of a dog. a Pomeranian named Teddy Bear. And because of that case, and it was a battle between ex-boyfriend and girlfriend about who gets to keep the pet after they break up, despite the fact that they had been sharing the pet after they broke up for a significant amount of time, uh, we took the case on to try to restore my client, Brett Lyman's, rights to Teddy Bear. And he hadn't seen his dog in over a year. Ultimately, after meandering through the Superior Court and one round of appeals, we went to the appellate court in Massachusetts. And we knew a victory there would certainly reset the law in Massachusetts and perhaps around the country, where this would be the first case where two unmarried people could be compelled by a court to have an enforceable sharing agreement for personal property that is a pet. There were 6 or 7 obstacles we had to navigate through with the judges, and I got to argue it. It took 15 minutes, probably 1 hour of prep for each, actually more than that, probably 10 hours of prep for each of those minutes. And the most exciting part was they do it in colors and they warn you how much time you have left. And when I got the yellow color saying you've got 2 minutes, I didn't want it to end. I was loving the back and forth. I was loving the argument. I realized, okay, you are now, you should now be confident in your own skills being able to argue at the appeals court. And then we had to wait the 8 months and then we won. And that just validated for me everything that we're trying to do here, that the law was certainly open to be modernized, that judges are ready for change in the area of pet law. And so it's motivated me, my staff, and other lawyers and clients really to keep pushing to see how far we can go. And so far, that's the accomplishment I'm most proud of.
Awesome. And Julie, we'll move on to you.
Sure. When I made the decision that I was going to give this niche, this sub area of practice, a try, one of the things I wanted to do is remember that since I didn't find a lot of resources in my own effort to get familiar with the law, I knew that I would be creating these resources, and I wanted to be an ambassador for the animal law community, the equine law community, and the legal profession, because back at that point, and maybe even true to today, people, at least in the horse industry, avoid lawyers. They don't hire them. There are a number of reasons, but I felt that I wanted to put the best foot forward for the industry, and to help the industry grow, because it was, some would say, shrinking decades ago, in part out of fear of liability. So what I'm proud of is, I look back now and I realize that I've got a lot of material that I've put out for the public to learn about how to avoid liability, to learn about how people could have rights, like stableman's lien laws that for stable owners give them the right to hold an animal until they're paid. Is that harsh against the debtors? Potentially, yes, but a lot of stables were folding because they weren't getting paid and the cost of keeping an animal was very high. So I'm proud of the fact that I look back now and these articles are out there. I have 4 books. The ABA published my last one in 2019 on equine law. This is there to let people know in the industry that I care so much about, that the law intertwines with what we do. It intertwines in a business setting, a recreational trail ride setting, property ownership setting, all different areas. So what I'm proud of is, as I look back on the decades that I've been adding equine law to my practice, I'd like to think that people are aware more of what their rights are. And I'm hoping more than anything that they're avoiding legal disputes. As my husband said when I started writing, you realize you're taking away business. And my response is that is exactly my goal. People, if they can protect themselves, won't need lawyers, or it'll narrow the basis for a dispute. So I'm proud of the fact that in my own small way, I've been helping educate an industry.
Thank you. And Bonnie?
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Julie said, and say that in the years that I've been practicing, I probably worked with over 1,000 veterinarians, and most of them are really, they're scientists and they're really interested in providing excellent veterinary care for the pets. The problem is a lot of them don't know about this thing called the Practice Act and don't really think about the importance of medical records. So I feel that my biggest accomplishment over the years with these 1,000+ veterinarians is teaching them that in order to stay out of trouble with the vet board and even with their clients, they've got to look at the Practice Act. They've got to be complying with the regulations and statutes, despite the fact that, that's not their thing. They went to vet school to help animals and that's what they're interested in, but they've got to comply with these Practice Acts, and they've also have to keep really excellent records. So probably over the last 25 years, I've given hundreds of talks on just medical records. I now teach a little part of Peter Weinstein's talk at the vet school in Pomona, if any of you know who Peter Weinstein is. And I think that that's really been an accomplishment. I think there are more vets out there that understand medical records and the Practice Act than there were previously.
Thank you. Eleanor?
I guess two things. I guess the most important really was starting the ASPCA's legal and legislative department, because before I was there, they had an outside firm that did some corporate work for them, but they had no legislative department. And they had a law enforcement department with agents that went around investigating cruelty to animals, carrying weapons, but really didn't have a lot of direction on what their rights were in terms of seizing animals and getting warrants and going to court to make sure the case was actually being prosecuted, follow up. So, and legislative work where the ASPCA had such name recognition, but was really not doing any legislative work at all. So starting that department was, I guess, the most important thing I did, because now they have God knows how many attorneys and so many other humane organizations as well. So that was probably, and then working on legislation. And I guess the most important bill over the 47 years that I've been practicing, I would say, is one that passed early on in my career. And there have been a number that have passed and many more that are still pending. But was a bill that passed that gave rights to tenants with pets, because way back when New York City landlords were evicting people with pets right and left, even people who had pets for years. And just because there was a standard form lease that said no pets. And so getting that law passed after I saw, one woman in particular, Edna Leonard, who was 87 and had dogs in her apartment for 40 years and was ordered evicted. We appealed, but she was able to keep her pet just because she died and the appeal took so long. But that was, I think, the most important thing, because it really saved the lives of many animals and people too, who just wanted to keep their animals and had nowhere else to go.
Thank you. And Bruce?
I had a lot of trouble with this question, so I'm gonna apologize, but I couldn't come up with less than 4 things. I'm just so honored to be helping the animals. So I'll run through them quickly though. And they're all in different areas, and that's I'm everybody here is wonderfully specialized, and I'm sort of jack of all trades and master of none in this animal law field. And so with respect to wildlife and biomedical research, the Project Chimps in Georgia with the 101 chimpanzees retired from research, that's certainly something I'm incredibly proud of. On the companion animal side, the San Francisco SPCA has started the Shelter Policy and Legal Services Program, and through that I get to represent over 100 now shelters and rescues in California. We do legislative work and consulting work for the shelters, represent them in litigation, and that is just a constant, ongoing, wonderful job. On the farm animal side, I've been helping 7 different organizations try to maintain the humane laws for farm animals, and I've been honored to go all the way to the Supreme Court with the National Pork Producers Council case in 2023, which established states' rights to enact those kind of laws, and we're still fighting them today. And then finally, on the animal cruelty side, really one of my first biggest cases was the Woodley case out of North Carolina, where we rescued 350 dogs who were in a horrible hoarding situation, and got me introduced to both hoarding and animal cruelty, which I've spent a lot of time focusing on over the last 30 years. That's it.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. For our next question, this is specifically for Julie, Bonnie, and Bruce. For those who practice in animal law in an already existing firm, what was your process for developing your specialty? What would you recommend to law students or other practicing attorneys who want to incorporate animal law into their legal careers but don't know how? And we'll start with Julie first.
Sure. Within a law firm setting, if you're a young attorney, a new attorney, more than anything, if you have a mentor within the firm who is a more experienced, established attorney, first things first, find out administratively if the firm is agreeable to beginning a new area of practice, a sub area of practice. And what you may find is right at the beginning, the firm may be adverse to it. They may feel, for a whole bunch of reasons, and I'm not validating any of them in this, but they may feel that it takes too much time. That could be better spent on other client matters. They may be worried about the rate. They may be worried that the clientele would be looking for free legal services, which are absolutely important. But in a law firm setting where a young attorney is judged on performance and numbers, it may be incompatible. Your mentor will tell you if the firm is willing to accept the possibility that while the practice, the sub area is up and running, it may not be profitable for a while. And if the expectations are understood and you know that you have the backup of the firm, well, then certainly there is your opportunity to begin. But then the next thing is, what can you do within a firm structure? Keep in mind, in my area, which is equine law, there are numerous different things that integrate with it. Tax law can involve equine law with hobby loss challenges. Administrative law can involve equine law. For the obvious thing, there may be people who have challenges, for racehorse owners who are challenged to be excluded from the track, people who are excluded from associations, breed organizations. There are opportunities in contract law, tort law. And tort law might be, if that is what your firm does, might be a great way to integrate it. That's part of what I do. Kind of like Bonnie was mentioning, an insurance company was looking for good representation for veterinarians. If your firm deals with insurance companies, they love efficiency, and I'm sure they would love an attorney within a firm they work with who can help on animal-related matters. So my other suggestion then is if the firm is receptive, you don't want to ruffle feathers, no pun intended, this is animal law. When you get into it, think about a way that allows it to be compatible with a larger firm, unless the firm is open to creating something new. That's a good starting point because then the firm can work with your areas and maybe even expand what they're already doing. Those would be the biggest suggestions that I would make. One other thing is firms often have budgets or on-site staff marketing experts who can help you. They can set up a blog for you. They can set up a website for you. They can help get your practice going and get you in front of people that you want to serve. So within a firm environment, those resources are great. But if you don't have the firm, you'll be paying for this and planning it out yourself and driving your own direction, which is what I did incidentally. I left a law firm when they didn't like the idea of setting up an equine law sub-practice and did it on my own. So the opportunity is there. You just have to work a lot harder because you won't have those resources.
Thank you. Bonnie?
Again, I'm just going to echo everything that Julie said. But I was really fortunate in that I didn't know this when I was hired by this firm, but the owner of the firm was very open to new practices. So I fell into this situation where when I went to John Kleindienst and said, I'd really like to start defending veterinarians, he said, great. So the firm supported all of my efforts. I was 53 years old, so I didn't have kids at home. I could do a lot of traveling. So I went to a lot of the local veterinary medical association meetings. My firm paid for me to go to the meetings. They paid for me to sponsor tables at some of the meetings and dinners at some of the meetings. So I was really fortunate that I had that kind of support. And again, my firm was very open to supporting my membership in American Veterinary Medical Law Association, with this committee and with a group called Vet Partners. That allowed me to get out into areas where there were other people who worked for veterinarians, lawyers who did buy-sells and lawyers who did other things other than defending veterinarians in administrative and litigation actions. So, I mean, if you can go to work for a firm, or, during the interview process, if you can ask them if they're open to new areas of the law. Some firms are, as Julie mentioned, some firms are not at all. They're very short, they have their one area that they specialize in, and that's what they want to do. So sometimes you have a more difficult time, but if you can find a firm that's open to this. Now, again, we are talking insurance defense. So it was an insurance defense firm I was working for, and I was going to be paid for this work by insurance companies. So I wasn't going to a firm and saying, hey, I want to do a lot of pro bono work. I was going to a firm and saying, if we can work with veterinarians, I'd like to, and it looks like Fireman's Fund will hire us to do it. So, I mean, that's just another way to do it if you end up, having that interview, and you can ask those questions about whether that firm is open to these new areas.
Thank you, Bonnie. And Bruce?
Yeah, thanks. This is great. I'll provide a different side of things, if you will. I'm a big proponent of the pro bono work. I do hundreds of hours on myself, but also a lot of the lawyers I work with around the country and many of the biggest firms. The big firms are very supportive of pro bono work these days. The youngsters really want to do it, and even the partners are really interested. And so I get involved with them, and they get to do animal law work on a pro bono basis. I should mention my work is not any of the stuff that Julie or Bonnie does. I do some custody and the work Jeremy does, but most of my work is sort of impact litigation, changing the way animals are treated in the law. And so somewhat controversial. So, but most firms are supportive of some pro bono work. Like I've got some firms that'll work for me on the companion animal and pet side, but they won't touch the ag side, for, either because they've got client conflicts or they just sort of a general business conflict. But my suggestion would be to start early, first of all, if you're a law student, like that's really important, and get involved with the organizations that have legal teams, that we're all aware of, the animal welfare organizations, because that'll get you a leg up, both if you want to go work for one of them, which is really the way to do animal law 100% of the time and get paid for it. Or even if you want to go to a firm and then reach out to them and say, I'm here, or go to a partner mentor and say, could we take on this pro bono animal law case? I think my perspective is it's really hard to get a firm to allow this kind of work. The stuff Julie and Bonnie does, that is slightly different because it generates more money, but my work in general doesn't. Sort of the first part of your question was, how did this happen for me? It was organic, almost accidental. I just thought, oh, this sounds like a good area. I'll try it after that ABA conference. But if you think about my metaphor for this is when you're walking on a trail in the woods and you hit a rock and you just sort of start stumbling and you hope you're not going to fall on your face. That's how I created my practice. I just kept stumbling, not falling on my face, and sort of developing the practice. So people were coming to me, organizations were coming to me. At this point, it's I'll just mention it's sort of crazy. I get roughly 10 cold calls every week from people from all over California, but all over the country with the animal law question. And I keep instructing my secretaries to stop writing my name on the bathroom walls, because I think that's where these are coming from. But seriously, it's just, I have to sort of monitor and try to figure out which of these are available. and which of them are potential paying clients or important impact litigation.
Thank you. And a follow-up for the same three panelists are, how have you been able to successfully market to your clients while you're practicing within a firm that doesn't specialize in animal law? This could be a really short answer. Just wanting us to know like how you're able to market to your clients.
I'll jump in and I'll be mindful of the time limitation. If we look at only headlines without a lot of filling in of the details, I do believe, as mentioned, articles, blog posts, getting your name out for information is a great way to do it. You'll be picked up on Google searches. Be careful and watch your bylines. Next is websites and domain names. I own about a dozen of them. Consider that as a way of just having a number of ways to hunt toward one website that you populate with information. Speaking engagements, in my experience, are the best way to get business, and use that time judiciously. Pick your topics well. Finally, aside from that, I would be a big believer in and am association membership. By all means, do it. ABA Animal Law Committee is a tremendous way to be on the cutting edge of developments, which you can write about, learn about, speak about. It'll make you a better lawyer. You'll be able to be involved as much as you want with books, articles, CLE presentations, even working behind the scenes. Association membership, in my opinion, is an extremely vital part of practicing in a niche like equine, in my case, equine or animal law. And it's the collaboration with others, which is the final point I would make, which comes from your meeting them through associations that can truly make a practice sail. When you meet people around the country, you can refer to and learn from.
Thank you. Bonnie?
Okay, well, again, I'm going to ditto completely what Julie just said. And just add one thing, and it's kind of spinning off of what Bruce said. While my firm wasn't doing, I wasn't doing pro bono work when I was actually working on the litigation and the administrative claims, I spent hours and hours and hours of my free time traveling to different veterinary medical association meetings all over the state of California, where I would offer to give a talk on medical records for the California Veterinary Medicine Practice Act. I also worked for companies that looked at the practice acts in other states. So, and a lot of that was done on my free time. So while my firm, essentially, when I was actually working in litigation, was being paid by the insurance companies, in order to get these clients, they have to know who you are, and you need to get out at their meetings talking and giving them information and hanging out with them, basically going to dinner with them, taking people to dinner. There's nothing, I mean, at this stage of my career, I can't tell you the number of cases I get referred to me every week that are just word of mouth. Somebody says, oh, I just got a letter from the board, and they're talking at something and they say, well, call Bonnie Lutz because that's what she does. So that only happened because I spent weekend after weekend at meetings all over the state of California. And I can't emphasize that more, that you've got to get out there and make friends with these people that you want to be your clients.
Thank you. And Bruce?
Yeah, agreed. Everything that's been said, I agree. I guess I'd add on just a variation on speaking, which is teaching. So I've been teaching animal law at 3 Bay Area law schools for ever. I probably taught the course 35 years. So, and I'm regularly getting, 35 times. And I regularly get calls from former students who are looking for insight and input. Also, writing, as Julie said, I do a lot of writing, including for ABA Tips, and talking to the press. Like if there's a press call on a case I'm doing, unless I've got a client that's, more interested or needs the press or wants to cover it, then I cover that. And so I get that coverage as well. And really, as I mentioned, with all the cold calls, I think it's about word of mouth and the internet these days for me. It's just you do your job and people find out about you. Also, there's a small number of us animal lawyers, so there's less of us to be found, I guess. So, if somebody's looking for a dog lawyer on the East Coast, Jeremy's name's going to be at the top of the list. So that's helpful as well in this day and age.
Thank you. And so the next question is for Jeremy and Eleanor. For those who have started their own law firms, what advice would you give to law students or practicing attorneys who are interested in starting their own practice one day? And Jeremy, we'll start with you.
Well, you just experienced it. If I wasn't part of this organization, I wouldn't know Bruce. And for Bruce somebody of his standing to say, I have a guy on the East Coast, I mean, that's why you belong to these national organizations and also the ones that you're at the state level, the bar associations. And if they don't have an animal law committee, you push to develop one. For me, the most important thing was going to every event that was being held. I would go to every pet expo, every outdoor pet parade, everything, and set up a table, and you have to have something to give away. Pens, now we're up to t-shirts. Make everybody who you talk to a little ambassador for what you do, because most people don't need you at that moment, but they will remember, hey, I met a guy who did something with dogs, and have stories ready. It's not me who's so interesting, it's the stories that are so interesting. And people want to hear stories because everybody, at least in the pet world, has had a pet, has had a dog, been bitten by a dog, knows somebody who was. And so you're giving them content, and content is key for the media. And if you can do it right and realize that the media, you're not offending the media or bothering them when you reach out to them to say, hey, I have content. They are desperate for content. They want to hear from you, and let the media decide if you have a case that's worthy or not of going in the news. And then suddenly, once they trust you, they'll reach out to you when they hear about a story. They'll refer people to you. I think other lawyers are the greatest resource for referrals. And in return, you need to do it for them. So lawyers don't necessarily look for referral fees in these cases, but you want to make sure that they're part of your bullpen too, that you refer people out to them. Because if people trust their lawyer and that lawyer trusts you enough to refer them to you, there's a much higher chance that they're going to sign up and retain you. But then just continuing to speak. I've never turned down a speaking engagement. Any podcast that I get a chance to do, even if there's going to be one person listening, you got to do it because you need the practice, you need the experience, and there's someone who's going to find you and say, I remember this guy.
Thank you. And Eleanor?
Well, I mean, for those people who are interested in starting their own animal law firm, or have a firm and want to get into animal law, I mean, to me, it's so important that people have gain expertise in some area so that they have, they can do a good job. So people have different interests. I find that unlike when I started, there animal law, like other areas of law, there's some people do wills for animals. Some people do landlord tenant work and and that's completely different area of the law. Some people do civil litigation and they're suing vets, they're suing groomers for negligence, malpractice, what have you. And family law, custody cases. Some, depending upon your interest, you might want to get involved with lobbying. Or not-for-profit law, but I would say even if it's outside of the animal law realm, because you can get this experience elsewhere, and then it could be used with animal law. But I would, because there's all these different areas of potential expertise. So I would say get experience in some area that you might be interested in, and then you could use that experience as a trust and estates attorney, as a landlord tenant attorney, to build a practice in one or more of those areas, but kind of know what you're doing, because you don't, I mean, I've occasionally seen lawyers who have such good intentions and want to do a good job, but really don't know what they're doing. That doesn't happen often, but I think getting the expertise in some areas of the law would be helpful for anybody starting a law firm.
Thank you. So we'll move on to another general question for everyone. So the question is, what has been your biggest struggle that you've had to overcome regarding your career? And Jeremy, we'll start with you.
The first is getting people to take this area serious, including judges, and having judges shake their head and put their head in their hands as to why they have to hear a particular case that I'm arguing. Having other lawyers snicker and giggle, and that happened a lot early on. But just having the concept that this being slow and steady wins the race, and force these people to take it serious by being credible yourself. If I have found being reasonable and credible is what is now turning heads, like, oh, I understand that argument now. And really, that's helped put a sort of a chip on my shoulder that for those people who didn't think you could do something or change careers mid-career or take this area of law serious, it's all possible. And another struggle has been when to say no, because you will get these emotional calls about, if you don't take my case, my cat will die, my dog will die, I'll never see my pet again. And really having to monetize this area of law. It certainly pro bono is important to all of us. And I like to be able to choose when and where I apply the firm's pro bono hours. But there's a lot of people who think that we're an extension of an animal rescue where we have the knowledge so we can give that away for free. But realizing that your time is valuable, even in the new area of law, and that you've accomplished something that people need to pay for, that's an important piece of this. And I say it because this practice, there's a reason that there haven't been other pet related law firms solely devoted to pets in Massachusetts, probably, is because they weren't run like a business. And I want this to exist as a resource for pet owners well past my time here. And the only way to keep that going and to incentivize young lawyers to come in is to make sure that you treat these practices as a business.
Thank you. And Julie, we'll go on next to you.
Well put, Jeremy. I think one of the biggest hurdles that I overcame, again, no pun intended, equine law hurdle, you get it, was that people trivialized it. And it doesn't just come from family members who thought I was going to starve. Jay Foonberg, who was an icon in ABA practice management, whom I met at an ABA meeting, who told me I would starve. It wasn't just that. It was showing up in court, and there were articles about me in the legal news, and judges just thought I was off my rocker. What is this? You're an animal rights lawyer. You must not have a real practice. And it is a real practice, and we know that. So I cannot tell you how hard that was. But we, as mentioned earlier in my remarks, we're ambassadors for the animal law community, for me, the equine law community, and the legal profession. Take that seriously and treat it like Jeremy does. Every matter is a significant matter. You are civil, you are professional. The briefing that you submit isn't just based on emotion. You are hitting the issues well. And then, of course, finding a diplomatic way to tug at the judge's heartstrings. Let me share with you a couple of things as a variant, and I'll be as conscious as I can on the time. If anybody here is interested in creating an animal law practice and you know of a niche within it that you might be of interest in, dog law, horse law, zoology kinds of legal, watch as you cast your net, and don't cast it too broadly, because your phone will ring more than Bruce's does and more than mine does. I cast a very wide net when I began writing articles, and I got people from all over the world contacting me seeking immediate legal help. But as you know, we cannot practice law without a license in these other municipalities and communities. We have restrictions. They don't know that. I was spending hours on the phone telling people, I'd love to help you. Here's how I can do it. And of course, they need another lawyer. Casting too wide of a net without letting people know your geographic limitations, maybe even your comfort level in your practice, creates a huge time, time suck, for loss of an appropriate phrase. It will take a lot of your time. So be clear as you market yourself to let people know what part of the industry you do and perhaps what you don't do, but better still what you do. Next is demographics. I didn't realize as I cast a broad net in my marketing that people would be looking for legal help, but they couldn't afford a lawyer. And I can only do so much pro bono. My engagement rate, and I'll be very candid with you, my engagement rate is the rate between those who contact me by email, phone, whatever, absolutely intent on hiring me compared to those who actually do. And in the last several years, without fail, the engagement rate is anywhere from 1% to 3%, meaning 97 to 99% of the people who contact me have serious legal needs, but they can't hire me. I'm not in California, I'm not in Maine, and they don't want to get a lawyer to work with me, or their matter involves $1,000 and I can't assist them because my firm's policies and restrictions don't help. So keep in mind that you may have an engagement rate that's very low, but the percentage that you do take is makes it all worthwhile. You can try to adjust that by letting people know your limitations. You can put that in your marketing. Speaking engagements, vet them carefully because they will come and you will seek them out. But keep in mind that a lot of conventions, and I've spoken in 29 states, will have concurrent speakers. I offer to all of you not to make the mistake I did by accepting everything, but being up against the rock star speaker and having a smaller audience. Vet your speaking engagements. Learn who is competing with you for your time slot and move it. That way you'll get a better audience and you'll be able to interact with more people. These were some of the mistakes that I made, and I'm hoping people here don't make them.
Thank you. And Bonnie?
Okay, well, I'm just going to add one little thing to that, and I go back to what Jeremy talked about with lawyers snickering and giggling. The biggest challenge I found was that, I would get really excited when I won a small claims case with one of my veterinarians, because of course my veterinarian was thrilled to death. And, a small claims case in California is only $12,500. And when we won, my client would be so excited. So I would reach out to the firm and tell everybody how we had just won this small claims case. And I had these people in the firm that were doing banking cases where they were talking about multi-million-dollar, recoveries. And, that was my biggest challenge was, hey, you don't understand. This small claims case win is such a big deal for this veterinarian because he knows or she knows that they gave the best treatment to this animal, and there's no excuse for this small claims lawsuit. And they won and they're thrilled. But that's what I would say over the years, that's been my biggest challenge, is in talking to other lawyers when they'll say to me, well, what's the biggest recovery that, you can get in a vet malpractice case? And, it's nothing compared to a banking case. So that's, in addition to what Julie said and what Jeremy said, that's been one of my challenges.
Thank you. And Eleanor?
Well, I'm going to kind of ditto some of this, being taken seriously, but I think that has changed over the years. I mean, just the fact that we're here with the ABA, many, many years ago, as chair of the Young Lawyers Division of the ABA Animal Law Committee, we went to the national convention, and I had Gary Francione, who some of you may know, is a professor at Rutgers Law School, and he presented on our committee's behalf a resolution that regarding animals, and that people should be compensated for their loss, and that animals shouldn't be just considered property. And he was neighed and clucked, and this was a large audience. This was the leadership as well as members. And so we've come a long way. I don't think that I've had legislators literally fall off their chairs laughing at certain bills at hearings, one in particular on trust for animals, and now it's the law in every state. So I think things have changed over time. When I went to the non-human rights hearing in court in New York State, I mean, in the city, even though the case wasn't won, it was very respectfully considered by the court. And so I think we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. I know with the struggle that I have on lobbying is the other side always has a lot more money. And so we're going against the Farm Bureau, we're going against labs, the NRA. I mean, so it's been a challenge to get legislation through because of that. So those are my struggles, but I think things are getting better. I think animals rights attorneys and just the role of animals generally are just being taken more seriously. I think people understand more.
Thank you, Eleanor. And Bruce?
Yes, thanks. I guess I've got a couple of different ones I was thinking about. One is sort of getting lumped together with everyone. Early on, I did a case in 2005 in North Carolina, and in his closing argument, the opposing counsel, who was representing the animal abuser who was convicted on every count, stood up and showed the judge an article in which I was interviewed. And his argument was, this guy, meaning me, is a PETA lawyer. They think fish have feelings, as if that had anything to do with the 100 dogs who'd been abused in this case. But he thought that was going to win the day. The judge ignored him, but it was that kind of thing. And still to this day, again, I do a lot of work in the ag area, but often until somebody understands where we're coming from, they lump us with the other advocates who are doing what they do and often breaking laws and maybe being violent. And so I'm just one of them sometimes, but most people are getting it. I do a lot of work with state attorney generals, and it's the progress of the relationship is always the same. The arc, I guess, is starts out with, you can tell they don't know if they really want to deal with this guy, meaning me. And then they see, well, he's actually talking about the law. He's not talking about emotionality. He's not saying, please save the piggies. And once they realize we've actually got subject matter expertise and we're focused on the issues at hand, they start to respect us as the lawyers who are doing the good work. And that's been so slow and steady, like Jeremy was saying, just maintaining. So that's one struggle though. And the same thing from prosecutors and district attorneys. We have the subject matter expertise on cruelty cases, but sometimes they just think, oh, we don't need this guy. He's an animal rights lawyer. And I always tell people I'm not an animal rights lawyer, actually. The animal rights lawyers are Steve and Gary and the Non-Human Rights Project. I'm an animal protection lawyer, animal welfare lawyer. I'm trying to make a better world for animals, but not actively trying to change the property status or get rights for animals. The biggest struggle of doing this work, I think, is actually the first question in the Q&A. So but it really is my answer in terms of the struggle. The question says, if you care so much, the thought of being exposed to cruel and heartbreaking cases every day can feel overwhelming. How do you protect your own mental health and transform that grief or anger into the resilience and motivation needed to keep going? And that's something I teach all my students and associates who work for me. And whenever anybody asks me, I say I have the best job in the world and the worst job in the world. I spend a lot of time on my computer crying because I'm writing a declaration about what happened to a pig or a dog. But that's the fortitude that gets me to turn around and teach people, don't walk into court and say, look what happened to this poor doggy, Your Honor. Walk into court and say, California Penal Code 597A says, and then they realize that you're not just arguing because you care about animals, but you're arguing because the law supports it. But that emotional devastation, I'll say, over the years is a very real thing. And I won't go into sort of my own personal traits or personal behaviors to deal with sort of your spiritual side and get rid of that. But I think it's really important if you're going into this work, and especially into the cruelty or farm animal or research work, to be able to blow off that steam in a healthy way.
Thank you, everyone. This is another general question. I guess just like, what are some lessons that you've learned in your practice that have had a universal application to other areas of law outside of animal law? And Jeremy, we'll start with you.
The difference, standing in court, the difference between lawyers can become obvious based on who prepared more. And I was not a lawyer necessarily when I was doing debt collection that was thoroughly prepared because I didn't even want to go to court. But the confidence that comes with being prepared and knowing your subject matter, regardless of the type of law, and understanding that the judge is not going to let you just go from A to Z and present your argument. You're going to be peppered with questions. You're going to be thrown off course. You're not going to be able to look at your notes. But the idea that you know your case so well that that doesn't matter. Being able to do an opening statement about pets, for me, it's simple because I just become the pet owner. I live that. And that's what's so scary, that if I didn't find my way into this area of law, what would I have done with that energy? But I think for me, and I get criticized by other lawyers for this, but I take it personal. And I think you can take a claim about money or a claim about dogs or any type of claim in the area where you practice. If you can take it personal, even for the hours of prep and when you're in court, it's going to come through. And it's going to be hard for people to look at you and say, whether you win or lose, that you're not a good lawyer. And so much of what we do is judged by people who really, it's out of our hands. But if you can walk out of the court or know to your client, we lost, but I did everything I possibly could, that's an amazing feeling. So understanding preparedness to not grade yourself necessarily by wins and losses, or redefine what a win is. And for a lot of us on this panel, it's sometimes just standing in court and making the argument is the win, because nobody before us was doing that. So find your inspiration. It can be in every area of law, I believe, if you take it personal.
Thank you. Bonnie?
Well, generally, because I do administrative law and I do hearings and I do litigation, litigation's litigation, admin law is admin law. So it's given me a broad knowledge of, I don't defend podiatrists, but I could figure it out if I had to. But I think more important is the connection with the people on American Veterinary Medical Law Association and this committee that has given me information about animal shelter law and dangerous dog law and other areas of the law that I don't necessarily practice, but I can't tell you how often I get a case where there's some offshoot of some of that that's happening. There's family law issues with possession of animals, and all of those sometimes fall into my vet cases. So it's been really helpful for me to have the connection to the AVMLA and this committee so that, and I also have people I can call on the phone and say, how does this impact my client's case, this dangerous dog case, this custody case? So, I think, again, the idea is to get yourself out there and learn as much as you can about animal law in general, and don't get pigeonholed into one little area, because there's so many wonderful areas that are called now under animal law, and a lot of it will come into your cases regardless of what it is you're doing for your specialty.
Thank you. My apologies, Julie. We'll go back to you.
I'll just
That's why
add,
I was confused. Sorry.
no problem, just one point, because I agree with everything we've already heard. And that is be a good listener. And here's what I mean by that. I talked about how I really believe in speaking engagements, especially if the audience is composed of people that you would like to become an attorney for. You can speak and organize your remarks and be engaging and enthusiastic, but by all means, listen, because the ideas that come up in the questions you receive are absolutely fascinating, especially if the audience is composed of an industry you care about. This is what people care about right now and what's important to them. And those questions will help you not just learn about the industry and the people you want to serve, but it'll give you ideas for your other marketing efforts. Maybe your next speaking engagement proposal, maybe your next article, whatever you're doing. Please listen carefully to the questions. And I've I've taken that to heart with other presentations I've given in the non-animal law setting. It makes a big difference.
Thank you. And Eleanor?
I would just add, again, to seek help and guidance so that you're proficient in whatever it is you're doing, and dialogue with people and negotiate. It will help in not only getting bills passed if you're working on that end, it'll help with litigation settlements. It'll just make things easier and better. Henry Spira was, for many of you know, Henry was an advocate. He died, 20 some odd years ago, actually, yesterday. I think it was 25 years, but 27 years. He negotiated, as much as he was an animal rights activist. He sat down with McDonald's, he sat down with Johns Hopkins, and he accomplished so much, and they all liked him. They understood the differences, but they all liked him and were willing to work with him. And as a result, he accomplished a lot. I mean, more than most people in their lifetimes. So I would say, kind of, as much as we all are very passionate in how we feel, I think it is important to, as somebody just said, to listen, to dialogue, to be respectful, and to be proficient. I think that's all important.
Thank you. And Bruce?
Yeah, I came to animal law out of a commercial firm that I'm still in, but so I learned all of those things about how to be hopefully a good lawyer, as a practicing in other areas, and brought them into animal law. But I think they're very important. When I speak with students, I say, learn to be a lawyer first, then learn to be an animal lawyer, because people who step out of law school, no matter where they went to law school, and hang out their animal law shingle, are more than likely than not to cause bad precedent and have troubles, because they just don't know how to get around the courtroom. So, what Jeremy said, I agree 100%. I don't take I always say to people, you have to bring the dog into the courtroom, but the dog is really somewhere else. You have to bring the dog into the courtroom through yourself, like Jeremy said. So internalizing that emotion and turning it into a compelling legal argument, I think, is one of the fortes of an animal lawyer. And yeah, the listening, the professionalism, like our hero, Mr. Spiro, that rhymes. I've sat down with the egg industry, with the pork industry, with the biomedical industry, and maintained my professionalism, listened carefully to them. When we first went to rescue a bunch of chimpanzees from a biomedical research facility, we were invited in, but their lawyer didn't know we were coming. And when their lawyer walked into the room, the first thing he said, and he meant it, to his clients was, "What is he doing here?" And he was me. And over 2 years, we became friends, because he realized I wasn't there for any nefarious reason. I wanted to help the chimpanzees. So I think it's so important, even more important in our area than in other areas of the law, to maintain that professionalism and let everybody, both the other side and judges and legislators, see that not only are we passionate, but we're also serious and we know the law. Like, knowing the law is the most important thing, just what Jeremy said. If you're prepared when you walk in and the other side is just arguing that can't be right, you got a leg up.
Thank you. And we'll ask one more question to the panel. How has your participation with the ABA, specifically the Animal Law Committee, impacted your career? And Jeremy, we'll quickly go to you.
Well, in addition to the referrals and learning about these other areas, in learning about how that other lawyers in the same field are dealing with the same problems that come up, that I thought I was on an island alone here in Boston, and I'm not. That assists so much. But another way being part of these groups help is, especially when you have your own practice. When you have your own practice, you don't have a boss to come back to say, like Bonnie said, "Hey, look what we did today. How great is this? I reunited this pet with this person." You have to find ways to stroke your ego or to feel good about yourself, more importantly, because when you're in it day to day, it can be hard to really see what you've accomplished. But when you're in groups like this with your peers who do similar type work, we highlight each other's successes. We acknowledge them. We want to hear about them. And it's a way to kind of see where you fit in the legal world, to realize these people that you've been listening to and you respect are suddenly proud of what you've accomplished. And you have that same pride in the people that you see in these committees in what they've accomplished. So, and you realize you have a long way to go, but it really gives you context for the work that you're doing, because sometimes your clients and your family can't give you the type of context you need from the group of professionals that are around you.
Thank you. And Julie?
Out of interest of time, I'll keep my remarks very short. One of the benefits of an organization like ABA with the Animal Law Committee is, and this is a benefit that you can't even measure, is the energy you see and the professionalism and intelligence you see of the people who are involved in it. I turn to a couple of people who stand out. Joan Schaffner has been extremely involved. She's a professor at GW Law School, and she is a force of nature with the newsletter, which she was involved in for probably decades, books that she has been involved in, and she does it because she cares, and she's creative, and she's just a ball of energy and a really good collaborator. I have always looked up to her, and I also look up to our current chair. Our current chair, Jim Griswaldi, is somebody who was a believer for decades in, with the clientele he served, excellence beyond compliance, professionalism, doing the right thing, carrying out your obligations in serving animals and the industry that he works with in a proper, ethical way. And a way that promotes welfare is important to him. And he took that to heart. And I got to see the work he did and had so much respect for what he did. So it's just the opportunity that you don't normally get, not just to be with people in different areas of animal law practice, but to meet people that inspire you and give you energy just by being around them and watching them. That is such a great thing. So I cannot say enough great things about involvement in bar associations, but this committee has made an impact on me.
Thank you. And Bonnie?
Well, again, I'm just going to ditto everything that Julie just said. This committee has been my life for the last however many years I've been involved with it. And I've learned so much from everybody on the committee. And it's just been an eye-opener and educational. And it's just the best thing that could have ever happened to my career. And then I'll also add that my diet has changed.
Eleanor?
I'm fairly new to this particular committee, but going back to when I started the original committee so many decades ago, I would say it kind of just validated that animal law was an area of the law, and there were many attorneys throughout the country that I didn't know existed that were interested, even if they weren't practicing animal law, that were interested in it. So it kind of adds to just your ability to not only work together and gain insights from people, but just to help you feel part of something more than just yourself, that you're not just alone working in a vacuum. So I think committees like this just help you do that.
Thank you. And Bruce?
Yeah, just being part of the community, knowing the committee exists, watching it form. And I write for the newsletter on a regular basis, which I certainly recommend to everybody. And that is really, I've been doing that since it started. And that has really motivated me to think a bit more about how to present the issues and areas that I work in the animal law field. So that is always relatively easy task, but it comes up every 4 months for the last 20 years, I think, or 10 years. And so is a great way to keep involved, and reading that newsletter every quarter, I think it is really informative to see what other people are doing.
Thank you. And there has been an audience question that I will pose to the panel. It's from Maria. It says, I'm an attorney working on my animal law LLM at Lewis and Clark Center for Animal Law Studies. My interest is in legal research and drafting and handling appeals for lawyers who might be too busy for research writing and are appellate judges. What can you recommend? And then Jean M., it looks like you would like to answer this question.
Sorry, no, I was just indicating that we were answering it live.
Oh, perfect.
I'll
Does anyone
go
from the
first.
panel? Okay, perfect.
I'll go first. Real briefly, just to piggyback, James Swaldy, one of the most influential people in my career. His book is right here. I see Deborah Hamilton is on here, Chris Green. These are people that when you get to know them and they get to know you, to have cheerleaders out there from these committees is so important on a national basis. Regarding that question, we file a lot of appeals here, and we're trying to change the law, and it takes getting the right client with the right resources. And we are not appellate attorneys. So to that person who reached out, find us, Boston Dog Lawyers. We're always open to having people pitch in on our appeals. The briefs are cumbersome, and we're always looking for some assistance from lawyers and law students. So thank you for asking.
Does anyone else from the panel have a response to that audience question? Alrighty, well, I just want to say thank you again on behalf of the ABA TIPS Animal Law Committee for everyone being here and participating in this event. I also want to thank our amazing panelists again for being here today to talk to everyone in attendance. It looks like we have more audience questions. Let me look. Perfect. Okay. Everyone's just thanking everyone again. But I just also want to thank James and Jean M. for helping to bring this event to life. This was a lot of fun, and I know that the remaining Professionalism series programs will be just as rewarding and educational as this one was. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.